I mean, this is Jim Everett.
Well, I came down here in 1980 to work in the government job, and previously I'd been writing poetry, and Richard Davey had heard of this, and at that time he was producer with Salamanca Arts Company, Salamanca Theatre Company, sorry, and he asked me to come over and be involved with writing a play about Tasmanian Aborigines, and so that's how I came to get involved with theatre in the first place. The whole play became Put Your Boots On, and was performed around a lot of schools, and your brother Ian was in it at one stage, and Ian Lang and many others, and that's what really got me to see that that was a new way of writing, because previous to that I'd only ever written poetry, and that opened up a new world for writing for me, and from there I wrote my first play in 1983, We Are Survivors. Somewhere in the early 80s, must have been either 80 or early 1981, Jack Davis brought his play to Tasmania called The Dreamers, and we'd all gone to see it, and Michael Mansell said to me after we'd seen the play, he said, "Why don't you're a writer, Jim, why don't you write the Tasmanian version of The Dreamers?" So I went home and laid down on my double bed mattress on the floor in a flat, and wrote We Are Survivors in 3 hours longhand, and a friend of mine, Karen Brown, typed it out, and that's the play. We never changed it, and then I went and browbeat a lot of people in the Aboriginal community who'd never even been on a stage before, and got them to perform the play We Are Survivors, of which I was producer, director and actor in it, and also procurer of all sorts of props from the tip shop or whatever. We Are Survivors was my first play. It was a play that was a kitchen discussion, Aboriginal family talking about all the hardships and the kinds of things that they could do for a future, and to strengthen themselves and reaffirm they're an Aboriginal people still alive here in this state today, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. After I did We Are Survivors, I wrote A Cultural Lesson, which is a political satire. It turns everything on its head, and Tasmanian Aborigines are in control of Tasmania, and we've got archaeologists, the bulldozers about to go through the old Parliament House up here, and we were hiring white fellas for jobs to help the archaeologists, Aboriginal archaeologists, research the Parliament to see what went wrong. I put that bit in. And so that play's just sort of like a barbecue area, a film barbecue area, just puts everything on the ear. And it's like having a laugh at yourself as much as it is laughing at white fellas. And the stupidity of it when we're asking white people, are you full-blood white Australian? To Robin Gray, who said, well, he had an ancestor who was English, so we put him down as being part white Australian. And those sorts of satires are really about having a laugh at the whole politic and how ridiculous it is, this question of Aboriginal or anyone's identity in the sense of, are you part this and part that? So it's all sort of around that, and it's having a real lark. Probably the cheekiest play I've ever written.
You said to me a few days ago that the primary audience for your work is the Aboriginal, the Tasmanian Aboriginal community, the Aboriginal Tasmanian community, I should say. Would you speak to that, Jim?
Well, I got involved in politics very early in the 1980s, or 79 actually, when I'd sold my boat in 1978 and come ashore and got involved with the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre, and then finished up in the first identified Aboriginal job in the state government, which was State Liaison Officer, Aboriginal Affairs, to being the political mole in the government. And I was part of organising a lot of things from within the government, of which I'm sure that old government ministers watching this will be very peed off about. so I've always been part of the community politics, and it seemed to me that the most important thing as a writer is to write the stories of the community for the community. There'll be interested people, of course, outside the Aboriginal community in the kinds of stories I can write, but I like to think that what I'm actually doing is writing stories that makes the Aboriginal community conscious of itself, its misgivings as much as its prides and achievements, and to address themselves in a way that's outside of the assimilation circle. So that's always important, I think, to have Aboriginal writers writing for their own communities, and I've held on to that principle ever since I've been a writer. I've never actually gone out to be published. People come to me sometimes and ask me if I've got something that they can publish, and I give it to them. I don't go out looking to be published, so I've never been really interested in it. I still see myself as an old fisherman that just learned a few new tricks, and so writing is just one of those things that you do. And I enjoy writing the stories because it's like being able to put the history jigsaw puzzle together a bit in your own mind. So because you end up dealing with a lot of things besides just writing theatre. I write political papers and things like that. So in a sense, it's about putting the reality to academic papers or whatever. And I think it's just a really important point for Aboriginal people to be able to read literature that's actually written for them rather than about them.
Could you kind of briefly describe what you feel are the major political concerns of your work?
Well, the main political concerns, I suppose, in my work cover a lot of variables, because it depends on what it is that I'm involved with as to what a particular politic might be. And a good example is my collaboration with Jonathan Kimberley, a non-Aboriginal painter. He's a young man, about 42, 43. He paints and I write, and we put the two together, very much like medieval maps, which we have an interest in medieval map systems. The politic there is really about people understanding place and identity anywhere on the globe, and to define the world outside of the conditioned world, what we call the global dome of thinking, where people are conditioned to believe this is the way the world should be, and you step outside of that and redefine the world in a natural state and understand your part as being part of it rather than superior to it. The other politics I'm involved with is the matter of sovereignty and national identity as Aboriginal people, as opposed to being citizens of Australia.
Yeah.
And so all these politics all come together under that banner, really.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes hard for people to understand how far. I mean, we've still got a long way to go, but how far things have come from, particularly from the middle 70s. When I was a kid in the mid 70s, we were taught in a single breath, there are no Aborigines. Yeah. It's very sad. They've all been killed, and don't go anywhere near the Maynards because they're Aborigines. in the one breath.
In one breath. Yeah.
And particularly in those in We Are Survivors, you talk about that just very openly and very directly, that we're not putting up with this shit anymore. We're bloody well here. Do you want to just briefly talk about that?
Well, because all of those circumstances that were back in, say, the 70s and the 80s, and especially when I was involved in political works as well in the 1980s, are still here. They've just done in different ways. They're more covert in some things, and the anger or hatred against Aborigines in Tasmania is still as alive now as it was back in the 60s and 70s, much less through the 80s. The talkback radio shows and what people had to say about us back then, and the kinds of letters that go into newspapers are still here. You can quite often be listening on the radio and we're getting blasted because we call Australia Day Invasion Day and so on. So those things are still alive with us, and I don't think that anybody in our community needs reminding of that. I think it's for young people in particular with those sorts of plays like We Are Survivors is that it takes them back into a history where we were still to achieve a lot more that now is quite normal for our kids. That wasn't in existence back in the 70s and 80s. And also the kinds of activities, the political activism that was going on with the Aboriginal community doing all sorts of different protests and demonstrations was much more campaigned than what it has to be nowadays. We do things a lot more differently in negotiating with governments and things like that. We still have our confrontations like out at the Brighton Bypass, Kootalina side. They're all going to be here because it's an endless struggle as far as we're concerned, and we're not going to go away. And that's the basis of the Aboriginal community's belief in its polity, that we're not going to go away, and it's an endless, the struggle continues. So it seems to me that these plays are really not outdated in any sense from what's happening now. I think it'll bring it more consciously into the minds of young people who are able to either be audience or play it, do the script readings. That it will bring it home that it was very much alive and probably more vigorous back in the 60s, 70s and 80s than they know now. They used to covert racism much more than we were. It was quite open racism when we was younger.
Yeah, it might be more dangerous when it's covert, eh?
It can be, yeah, because it's like, from what I can gather, the Facebook's like a bullying site, and I think it's sort of something like that. Covert racism is sort of like a sneaky way of mental bullying. Yeah.
We are not going to go away. It's almost the whole project, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what the community lives with, and like, the other thing is, I mean, like, it's not like you walk around with it as if it's niggling you all the time. You just know it's there. I don't even think about it most of the time because I'm too busy thinking about, well, what am I doing today, what am I doing tomorrow, where's my diary again? And it's just like the real life gets on. It's when you've got a particular political matter or cultural problem or whatever it is that you really start to focus in on it, because like, at the end of the day we're just people like everybody else. And our lives are not situated just around thinking about being Aboriginal and white people don't like Aborigines sort of thing. It's your life will be wasted. Now, young people, we don't want them thinking like that, and they don't. I think it's more about how they express themselves as being Aboriginal and what kind of strength we sort of bring into that community consciousness. So I think these plays are all about those things too.
So if a theatre company or a school group are interested in producing one of your plays, how would you prefer they went about doing that?
Well, first up, if people want to do an interpretation of the play where they've got more understanding of what that play's about, then I invite them to be in touch with me as they can. But I've got no problems about people trying to producing any of my work and put their own interpretation on it if they like, because I'm a great believer in the freedom of speech, and I don't want to be precious about writing plays and say no one else can do it but me. So, people should have a go.